Hello there everybody, I'm Johanna McMullan. Thank you very much for coming. This is a very strange experience for me to be in a lecture theatre with such attentive audience. I won't have to tell anybody off for talking. Really appreciate you coming here today, thank you. Hopefully you can see the screen. It's better for Matt to have the lights on at the front if that's okay with you. And hope you ladies can hear at the back because that projector can be very loud. So just a short presentation to tell you a little bit about Labtutor and the evaluation of such, which I looked at nearly 18 months ago with Marion Trainer as my supervisor for my master's thesis. And I've called this a tool to educate Generation X because of course educators should be interested in who they're educating and why they're educating and what purpose. So I'm involved in undergraduate nurse education, hopefully making practitioners fit for purpose, and more importantly that they understand and can join up the concepts that we teach them in university and take them through to practice, which has been criticised heavily in recent times. So who are we educating and who are the educators? So I don't know if you've ever heard of Generation X, Generation Next and Generation Me. And I'm quite aware that lots of you look very young, so I might have to look at the old kickers over here to help me out. And this is just a graph. This one happens to be England and Wales. Sorry, there wasn't a good image for Northern Ireland. And you'll see very understandable dips in the population. First World War, the Depression, Second World War, and of course you're all aware of the baby boomers, post-Second World War, introduction widely available of the contraceptive pill. Nobody could really understand this dip here between 1970 and 1975. That would be me. And they actually call us Generation X. Okay, and it was actually after, there's lots of research on this which I find very interesting and wish I had more time to look at, but the reasons for Generation X was when people realised that children were not just to be a commodity. You have as many children as you want. There started to be a responsibility of looking after your children and doing the best for them. But Generation X, between 70 and 75, children were actually seen as a very negative thing. Fascinating research if you look, even the films about at the time, The Devil's Baby, and things like this. Okay, and Generation X were definitely expected not to speak. We're treated very differently. Anybody from that era? Just me? Yes. Nobody did our homeworks with us, and you certainly were not brought up to be the centre of people's universe. But then from the mid-80s and from the 90s on, they actually call it Generation Next. And that's where children are very much the most precious thing that parents can have, are the centre of their universe. I don't know if anybody here from Generation Next? And it is those from Generation X that are producing from 1990 onwards Generation Next, going into anybody born after 05 are called Generation Me, because they've been brought up to be the centre of their parents' lives, and parents feel obliged to do everything for their children. Unfortunately, however, and if you want to look more at that, Mark Taylor is actually fascinating to listen to, talking about Facebook, Instagram, making fun of his daughter, putting a photograph of her dinner on Instagram and saying who'll be interested in that. Within 5 minutes, 178 likes. And Generation X, unfortunately, their idea of parenting, completely different from the way they were brought up, is to make their children feel like the most important person in the world. Job, socialising, everything has to come after the children. And as you can see there, great quote, reactionary parenting of Generation X are today's students who are from Generation Next. The era of the wanted, precious, protected child who's growing up in a child-centric household, the child who gets trophies just for showing up. And I definitely see that with my children. They will go to the swimming gala. Does everybody get a medal? No, only those people who win. Why not? That's not fair. All right. And Mark Taylor also talks about whether you're a bulldozer parent or a helicopter parent. All right. Parenting should be about hovering above your child and letting them do the things themselves so they can stand on their own 2 feet, whereas a bulldozer parent moves everything out of the way up to the point where they leave home and then they cannot cope. And that point is usually when they start university, right? And those I've been at this school 9 years now, and in my first year never had a parent come to me. It was just the students. Now increasing numbers of bulldozer parents bulldozing their way in, asking questions and so on. So a different parenting style. And just for illustration, anybody from Generation X, I guarantee, does not take selfies. Anybody from Generation Next does take selfies. Not only is it all about them, but even if it's not all about them, it's still all about them, and try and get into the middle of it. Not that I'm being insulting about people from Generation Next, by the way, I must put that in. It is the way they think. They are, one of the biggest problems, of course, is many educators are from Generation X. So what they are expecting students to be like, authoritative, listening to every word they say, compared to those from Generation Next, who have been brought up in a consumer environment where they know what value for money is and they demand value for money, will not take things lying down, which is of course a very positive attribute that generation have. They know their rights, and coupled with that, of course, in the last 5 years has come fee paying. So they have every right to demand value for money, don't they? So this is all things that educators from Generation X must bear in mind. Okay, so say Generation Next, their academic preparation and expectations, their consumer orientation, and their esteem and important issues are completely different from any other generation. And of course their use of technology are often challenging these traditional education practices. There's a few references if anybody wants to read up any more about that. So what we must remember about the students of today, and of course we do have mature students often, but today's students, is that they demand to be the centre of their learning, quite rightly, especially if they're fee paying, which doesn't apply to our particular school, but somebody's paying for their education and somebody should be demanding quality. They demand reward. They've been brought up with GCSEs, A-levels or access courses in small modules where you get reward as you go along. Gone are the days where you taught the content, then you're assessed and you pass or fail. A lot of the expectations now is if you were taught the content, you sat the assessment and you're unsuccessful, that was the fault of whoever delivered the content, which can be, of course, not many times. They have much shorter attention spans, and that was a quote from a piece of research which was done about lecturing. When he's lecturing, I think, where's the remote? And then I realise I can't turn over, how boring. As I say, they demand value for money. And more importantly, of course, another key feature of students of today is that technology now belongs to the masses, not the few. They're digital natives, they've been brought up with it, and this is called educators flat-footed. And I'm a mother of 3 boys, but there's actually 4 boys in my house with my nephew as well. My P1 is doing homeworks online. My 3rd year boy is starting GCSE astronomy all online with his iPad, using apps. So we're way behind at undergraduate level, I'm afraid. And this is just a photograph which I found very interesting of the papal ceremony. Same room, difference of, 8 years. And you can see a couple of people taking photographs and the difference in 2013. I can certainly remember owning my first mobile phone, whereas my 6-year-old has one, I'm ashamed to say, possibly because he's only the youngest of 4. And I say that the main point is that they can access material much faster than you can. Gone are the days where you will stand in a lecture theatre and impart your great knowledge to people that have never heard this or can't access it. And to my embarrassment, I recorded this literally 30-second clip. This is my youngest son playing Minecraft, which is a brilliant piece. Anybody know about Minecraft? You build things, you have to access the resources, and if you can't do it, there are online tutorials which you watch. So that's just a computerised game. I had said to Roger, I'm going to ask him a question. His dad recorded this for me, and I happened to be looking at my lecture for Monday, which is musculoskeletal system. So if the sound quality is poor, I just said to him, how many bones have you got in the body? And And he's watching his dad, but you'll see how long it takes him to do this task.
Roger.
Mhm.
I'm doing a lecture about bones.
Mhm.
Do you know how many bones you have in the body?
No.
Will you help me find out?
Yes. 306.
How old are you?
6.
Can you show Daddy that?
Yeah, keep it up. Do hold too close. Good man.
Thank you.
So, my rather embarrassing clip shows you there that it took my 6-year-old 8 seconds to find out everything that was on my first PowerPoint presentation for 368 undergraduate students. Makes you think you're wasting your time, doesn't it? And how do we still impart our great knowledge to our students? Well, old school methods, which are still all too common, is just the passive delivering of content to students, as you can see, which are proving less and less successful in bringing students to successful learning and developmental outcomes. So there's the lecture theatre 2,000 years ago, 1912, and there's the plans for one of our new buildings in Queen's. Not a lot has changed, sadly. So what must we do? We need to move content out. There's no point in you standing telling them things that they can Google, and probably are, under the desks to ask you a difficult question and 10 minutes later. You must make modules into passive progress with rewards on the way. You must ensure you engage students, maximise participation, and of course increase formative feedback, which is personalised and timely. That is what students actually want. They do not want you to stand and tell every bit of content. But of course that is easier said than done, isn't it? But we do have some tools available to us, increasingly powerful communication and information technologies. And technology enhanced learning is the term used to describe any of those, anything where technology plays a significant role in making learning more effective. And in its broadest sense, it could be hardware, smart handheld devices, anything. And research way back in 2006, was actually quite a long time ago, found over 98% of undergraduate students had a handheld device with access to the internet. So we're not really talking 2020 here. And one such technology enhanced learning package is Labtutor. Now Labtutor literally comes in a silver box. It's hardware and software. This is a cut and paste job from one of the experiments that you can do. It could do blood pressure, peak flow, you can electrocute frogs' legs, you can stimulate earthworms, anything you want to do, but the point being that it is the students that carry out the experiment instead of the tutor standing at the front of the room saying your blood pressure will rise, your respiratory rate will increase with the release of adrenaline, and the parasympathetic system will make you rest and digest, but to actually get the students to do these experiments themselves. It was rather a costly piece of equipment. Unfortunately, it's not installed yet in every computer throughout Queen's, obviously, and for the students to do it in groups of 3 and 4 at an hour each would take a huge number of rooms and a lot of resources. So what I did in this particular module was just basically cut my lectures to shreds and realised there was no point telling about the structure and function of the heart, that they could Google that in probably 8 or 9 seconds, learn it, and the first slide and what they knew they had to study before they came to lectures was the basic anatomy. The rest of the lecture time was spent going over key concepts and doing live demonstration. So one, for example, was right here, and we talked about nerve impulses and what would increase your heart rate and blood pressure. Got a chap whose name happened to be Declan, this is the example I'm using here, connected him up to Labtutor, and on the screen we could see his resting pulse rate. Somebody asked the question, why is it about 90? I'm sure it shouldn't be that. We discussed how he's probably nervous being in front of his peers and being picked out for a group. We then made him run along that corridor, up by the lift, down here about 5 times, reconnected him up, and everybody was jotting down, and we were taking his blood pressure, pulse rate, respiration rate at 5-minute intervals over the next 5 minutes, whilst on the left hand side of the screen I presented a few more slides, and they were all quite interested in that. So safe experiments, extensive, I say there's exercise bikes, peaks, flows, anything available to you. And then what we did was their online tutorials then was reflecting on what they had seen in the experiment. So instead of answering basic anatomy and physiology questions, we actually said, for example, what was Declan's resting pulse? Why do you think this might have been higher than is normal? And that is taken directly from the experiment that they had seen live in the lecture. Something quite important about it as well, of course, is not to leave students behind. So when they are working remotely, when they are working at their own pace and not together in a group, not a tutor checking up, there has to be checkpoints. And incorporated in all these online tutorials, there were points where the system doesn't let you progress until you've got 100% in that. And there is a question and answer app type thing where they will send an email to me asking a question, and once they've unlocked that part, they're able to progress. And they all seem to enjoy that, getting the immediate feedback, being able to concentrate their efforts. So if you know the answers to question 1 to 12 easily and stuck in 13, you're not stuck in a room with other students who are stuck at number 2 or 3. And of course the reverse being true. If you're stuck in question 3, the rest of the group aren't motoring on without you. And they all enjoyed the rewards. I could hear the buzz throughout the module of them saying, oh, I'm on to the next one, or are you? I haven't had time to do this. I asked the students as well when they did their tutorials, and I got everything from on the bus to, well, my son's at swimming lesson, just whatever at a time when it was convenient to them and when they felt engaged. So that was good. So that's what Labtutor actually looks like. So the aim of the study then was I wanted to find out from the students themselves what they thought of it. The secondary aims obviously was to investigate their views on engagement with material online as a result of using the system, participation and levels of interactivity in the lecture as a result of using the system, enhancement of learning, and the usefulness of the formative assessment facilitated by using this system. To put it in layman's terms, when I was explaining to my granda, I wanted to know if it was of actual educational benefit or whether the students just thought it was a bit of crack that broke up an otherwise boring lecture. Well, it was a bit of crack, so anything to break up the ineffective 2-hour-long lecture, I suppose, is a good thing anyway. So it was a convenience sample of that particular group of February 13 students, of which there was 115, to complete a fairly basic 32-item questionnaire using Likert scales. But in order to facilitate such a large group, to ensure confidentiality and ease of collaboration and data, collection of data, I actually used the PRS system, which I don't know if many of you are familiar with. It's just like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? So again, you have a handset. The other thing that I thought was interesting about that was it was basically a 100% response rate. So at the point of module evaluation, and I always use that for my module evaluations, I had all sent out a participation sheet and so on and offered that if you want to go, please feel free to go. And in fact, I'm leaving the room and a colleague actually collected the data when nobody left because they all quite enjoy pressing the buttons. And they all tell the truth using it as well. Previous module evaluations, if they tick the right hand box of the first one, they just usually tick all the right hand boxes. Left hand, they'll just continue on with the left hand box, maybe put a couple in the middle to take the bad look of it. But when you're using the PRS system, you can see how long it takes them to respond. They can change their mind at any point and they know it's completely confidential. There's no way of me knowing who responded to what. The other brilliant thing about the PRS system is when you collected the data, right click, brings up a spreadsheet, and all your statistical analysis can be done immediately, literally within seconds. So that takes a lot of the donkey work and leg work out of it. So interestingly, these are just a few of, not the best responses, but to me, the more interesting ones. Participants agreed that the lectures were more interesting when the system was used. And I did get lots of qualitative feedback from students afterwards, asking them why they liked it. They said it definitely caught their attention. They were less likely to be Googling something else underneath the desk. It was great to see things live. and they definitely thought that lectures were more interesting when the system was used and caught their attention for longer. That they were more attentive, definitely, than in other sessions and previous sessions. I asked them then, would they be more likely to attend lectures if they knew the system was being used? And a lot of them did. Those that disagreed, however, quite a few of them said, sent me notes and gave me feedback to say because we would have come anyway, which I thought was quite nice. I think they wanted to express to me that even if they'd said no, it wasn't because they didn't want the system to be used, it's just they would have been attending anyway, which was nice. They felt more involved when the system was used, which of course is imperative to increase student participation. And with regards to feedback, participants in the study also reported that the system was useful in identifying gaps in their knowledge. So we do strive as educators, of course, to give timely feedback, or should it be feed forward. There's no point assessing a student and then telling them that they've failed and telling them the points where they've gone wrong. Students should be given opportunities as they're making their way through a course to be able to identify gaps in the knowledge themselves, to give them a fighting chance of turning their lack of success at that point to success at the point of assessment, or else it's not fair. And that they would use the information from discovering where the gaps in their knowledge was to direct further study. So I would like to go on and look at if they were actually more successful at the point of assessment, and I'll get back to you with that hopefully one day. Most importantly for me, as I say, as an educator, knowing that the newer generation think in apps. And research has shown that they think in apps. They will learn information and they will put it into a certain box, and that belongs there and not there. And I've had a sneaking suspicion, as a lot of my colleagues have, and a lot of the literature says, that with undergraduate nursing programmes at the minute, there's what we learn in university and then there's what you learn on the wards. So students will sit down and learn the structure and function of the cardiovascular system for me to be assessed in my module. When that's passed, they will go onto the ward and learn how to take a blood pressure. And I find that soul destroying. So one of the things I was most interested in was, can you see how, when we're talking about the release of adrenaline to increase blood pressure and pulse rate on a live lab rat running up and down that corridor, and then when you actually take their blood pressure, can they actually link the concepts together? And again, overwhelmingly, they believed that the system did help them conceptualise concepts more easily. They understood what I meant by a release of adrenaline, increasing blood pressure and pulse, for example, in this situation. And that they helped, and they believed that this would help them retain the information better, which was brilliant. Unsurprisingly, they also reported that it was therefore beneficial to their learning. So overall, they felt that using the system was better than not because it helped with their learning. And overall, they found the Labtutor an enjoyable and useful training tool, with 2% undecided and 6.6% saying no. So I think that's pretty overwhelming. So a number of recommendations arising from this very small study. Higher education institutions should maybe consider investing in technology such as Labtutor, not Labtutor per se, but certainly investing in technology to enhance large group teaching and the quality of small group teaching, and bringing the quality of small group teaching into the large group setting. Because for the immediate future anyway, it looks like we're stuck with a conventional lecture theatre with one tutor imparting knowledge onto a group of individuals. But we do not need to tell them things they can find out themselves. We need to engage them and link concepts and theory to practice. As I say there, they should strive to assist students to work remotely and at their own pace, and must ensure that students, particularly those new to this level of education, are carefully guided as what to study and how to access this material. So before we embark on purely online courses, a concern of mine was the mature students in the group, who the majority of whom had come from access courses and so on, and had absolutely no trouble engaging with technology. And anybody that did struggle, it was 10 or 15 minutes just pointing them through things. But certainly for younger folk today, as I say, being digital natives, it's been absolutely no problem. So my 6-year-old does a lot of homeworks online, and his reading is all online in Bug Club. So we're way behind. And I also wondered if the personal response system could be utilised more, as it also provides students with the opportunity to participate more fully, particularly in large group lectures, and provides a lecture with feedback. So even if you're just doing a single lecture, the use of the PRS system, if you ask them check questions as you go along, you can skip on if the group are keeping up with you, or backtrack. We use it very successfully in our module, and the students enjoy using it, and they're quite disappointed if we're not using it in that session. And perhaps, and there's a lot of research out there thinking about apps, further apps to test everything. You can get AQE apps, GCSE apps, A-level apps, things to test your knowledge, and perhaps that would be relevant to undergraduate courses as well, but we seem to be well behind at the minute. That's it. 25 minutes, that's all I have to say, except I hope I didn't offend anybody from Generation X or Generation Next. We're just different, that's all. We need to recognise each other's skills.